Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are all dialing in from. My name is Muhammad Ali Syed, or Mo. I'm a attorney with Offit Kurman in the Washington, D.C. area. Welcome to our webinar. We are recording it today at noon Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, October the 15th. We're very pleased that you have signed up and registered, and I'm extremely excited to present our speaker. The title of today's webinar is Conversation with the CEO of Emumba, Mr. Owais Anjum, and the topic is Business and Global Mobility Leadership During COVID-19. So as you are all aware, we are going through some unprecedented times. Business leaders have faced challenges like they've never done before. Operations have been impacted in ways that were impossible to predict only just a couple of months ago. And we are still going through a period of uncertainty. Now, having said that, there are businesses and leaders who are making their way through this difficult terrain and demonstrating success. And best of luck to them. And hopefully, these are the drivers of our economic growth and development. And the idea here is that we learn from our speaker today, and I encourage all of you to share your questions. There is a chat box in the GoToWebinar platform, so please use that. If it doesn't seem to work, please email me. My email address is mo.syed, that's mo.syed @offitkurman.com. So a little bit, I will let Owais talk more about his business, but I know the business as a cutting-edge software technology firm that has a very well demonstrated ability to attract and retain top talent and to solve complex problems. It comprises of Silicon Valley leaders and veterans that together have 75 plus years of cumulative global knowledge. And the details are there on the flyer. But basically, we want to hear from Owais about what he does, how he got where he is, and how the recent couple of months have been, playing out. Owais himself has 20 years of experience in software product design, technology management, and leadership. In addition, he's built and scaled teams both in US and globally, really, and has a track record of delivering high-quality products. And prior to Emumba, he did a series of startups, which are Quick Out, Giving at Work, Patience with Power, so here we are with Owais. I have some questions. The way we like to run this is really as a conversation, not a formal presentation. Please feel free to jump in with your questions. And last but not least, I just wanted to say that this is being recorded, and we will send out an email with the recording, I believe 2 days from now. So you can have that as reference, and certainly if you find it interesting, please circulate it to your networks as well. Okay, so with the introductions behind us, hi Owais, how are you today?
Hello, Mo. I'm great. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm not sure of the demographics, but you may have a geographically distributed audience here. So your morning, your afternoon, whatever it is. So good to meet all of you.
Absolutely. So Owais, tell us about what you do. I guess how did you start off, and how did you get to where you are now?
All right, it's a long story, but I'll try to summarize. I've been in the tech space for 23 years now. Um, I think if I look back at my career, it's like split half and half between US and Pakistan. I started my career in the US, worked with a number of startups in the Silicon Valley, did my MBA as well, did a lot of volunteering with a number of you know entrepreneurship related organizations, which helped me build my network. And then at some point, I decided to move back to Pakistan. So my sort of first thing coming back was I was working for a company in California. I started their offshore operations in Pakistan, ran that setup for 5 years, and the company was eventually acquired by McKinsey. So it was a very interesting sort of journey back home and setting up a company and finding a bit of a success over there. After that, I did three back-to-back startups. One was, as you mentioned, was in the sporting industry. The other one in the healthcare, and the third was in the hospitality. Um, did series, my seed rounds from the Valley as well. But unfortunately, I think looking back, all of those three startups were failures. They were perhaps technical successes, they were product successes, but I was never able to convert them into good business success. Monetization as we wanted never happened, or it was too slow to happen, and we had to move on to the next thing. So Emumba in its current form, it's a services organization. So this is my fourth venture, and I'm hoping to be lucky. We've been at it for 6 years now. So my entrepreneurial journey essentially started in 2011, and Emumba in its current form is in its sixth year. We've been growing, pretty fast. We have a team of around 150 people. We have presence in Pakistan, we have presence in the Valley, we have presence in the UK. So these are the three geographies that we particularly focus on. And I think one of the key recipes for us has been to attract top talent from the Valley, the talent that was sort of always wanted to move back to Pakistan, but was looking for a really exciting opportunity. And that turned out to be a great recipe for us because that allowed us to attract top talent. And not only that, it allowed us to attract top companies as being our customers. Right now, we're working with Microsoft, we're working with Salesforce, we're working with A10 Network. So, I mean, all big companies. So yeah, long story short, I think that has been the journey. So right now, we are, in a pretty good shape. I'll talk about the COVID and all of those things, but this is kind of a brief intro. And also at a personal level, I'm married, father of four, used to play squash, and I'm hoping that the world gets back to normal things and I can go back to the squash court again.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that would be, wonderful to go back to how things were, especially if you are a fan of sports and squash that you're playing indoors. Um, Got it. But no, thank you so much. And if I haven't said it before, I'm extremely grateful to you for taking this time out, and also on behalf of my firm, we want to send you gratitude for actually, participating. So, okay, so we heard a little bit about your background, and tell us more about what your role is right now. Like, how do you spend most of your time within the organization?
So, as you know, I'm the founding CEO, and in that role, you end up wearing multiple hats, right? But in the past 3 to 4 years, my key focus had been to bring enough leadership in the team that is capable enough that I could delegate most of my roles to. So currently, I think if I were to look at my role, there are two key things that I focus on. The first thing is business development and strategy. That's one of the key things I drive. And the second one is really, organizational culture, because uh, we have to have a culture that attracts top talent. We have to have a culture that can retain top talent, because I think there's enough business out there. It is really the limiting factor is not the amount of business that is available out there. It is really the quality and the quantity of talent that we can have in our organization. I think I've been successfully able to delegate most of the project execution and the delivery stuff to my sort of team members. So these are the two key things I focus on right now. I mean, with COVID, obviously, this became a very interesting situation because everything that we were doing previously was put to question. I mean, the first thing that happened was, the great uncertainty in terms of the revenues, right? I mean, back in March, I think we did some early assessment and we projected that I think instead of growth in 2020, we will perhaps get a 30% revenue hit, looking at all the things the way they were going. And we started planning towards that. And we wanted to do a plan where we did not have to do any layoffs, because the negative sentiments that come with the layoffs, it go a long way, right? And if you are in the services industry, your intellectual property are essentially your people, right? So what you don't want is that at some point, if you start getting business, but you have spoiled your reputation as an employer and you're not able to attract more talent, right? So the key thing was the balancing act, as to how can we survive with the projected revenue loss of 30% and not having to lay off any people and make sure that we're doing well. And I think we were financially sound enough to be able to do that. But also then we realized, month over month, quarter over quarter, that things weren't as bad for us. And it wasn't due to any particular strategy that we took. I think we just were lucky that most of our customers or the verticals that we were serving, they were not in the direct line of fire. And what I mean by that is that we were not working with the travel industry. We were not working with the tourism industry. We were not working with the oil and gas sector. We were not working with the sporting industry. Had most of our revenues been coming from there, there was no chance of survival, right? I think a major portion of our revenue was coming from the networking industry, the enterprise networking industry, and we were worried that it would get a hit. But it was counterintuitive to us, but they actually won more business. And one of the reasons was that people were forced to work from homes, which put more pressure on the telecom networks, right? Because everybody wanted more bandwidth and cellular network and video calls and audio calls. And all of these networking companies were able to sell more devices to them. So they actually saw a surge in revenue, which meant, more business for us as well, right? So I think month after month, we started realizing that, okay, I think we are, of course, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but perhaps we can be a little more ambitious. And in the past 6 or 7 months, I think we have continued to hire, which has been great. We didn't lose any customer, which is extremely awesome. We lost a few customers that were in the pipeline, the prospects, because the expansion wasn't happening fast enough. We also won a couple of customers, and interestingly, one of the biggest customers that we won was because of COVID, because they wanted to do some analysis on COVID data sets, right? And with our abilities in analytics and data engineering, it became an opportunity. So in hindsight, I think partly strategy, but mostly I'd say luck, that we being in the verticals that didn't get hit immediately, I think we've done fairly well.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And it's also just, been what I've observed, like even within the legal industry, like our ability as legal service professionals to adapt to a remote environment wasn't as bad as it might have been expected. So the technology plays a key role. So we have a lot of tools that we use, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, all of these things, and the handheld devices that make our business continue to operate. And some of it was happening even before COVID, and it's for example, telemedicine. People were doing it before there were remote doctor's visits, and now it's become much more acceptable to use that option. And I am curious as to, even after COVID, we will probably retain some of these new habits because they've been proven to be reliable. So let me ask you this, like, give us a little bit more of an insight into, and you've spoken a little bit about it, but what are the product services that Emumba offers, and how have they developed over time? Did you start off in one direction and then evolve to kind of then refine into another direction? That at least to me is an interesting topic of just exploration.
Excellent question. So at this point, we are focused in four areas. The first one is, as I mentioned previously, we specialize in building applications for the enterprise networking industry, which fundamentally means that we build web applications, but we have a very deep understanding of how the enterprise networks and how the appliances work. So that becomes a specialization. The second area is data engineering, and you know, I, I think you'll hear a lot about AI and machine learning and data science. I mean, those are the buzzwords that everybody is using. The reality is that 90% of AI and machine learning, what is happening under the hood is essentially data engineering, which is the basic plumbing of data and how data is being processed, right? And then we realized that for a services organization, that is what we need to focus on, right? Because that's where the bulk of the work is. So data engineering is the next area of expertise. The third one is um, I'm, I'm not sure whether for the legal fraternity it may be a little uncommon term. It's called DevOps. It has become a hot area in the past 4 or 5 years, which is essentially how we operationalize software. It is one thing to write software. It is another thing to actually roll it out, how it goes to production, how it is being used by customers, how do you apply updates, how do you apply patches, and a bunch of other things, right? So that's the third area of specialization. And the fourth one is fintech, with a particular focus on the technology that is used in high speed trading, high frequency trading, where latency and performance is extremely important. And we are sort of key focus is to really stay focused in these areas, because there are opportunities in every area that you look at, right? But for us, the key thing is to pick fewer areas that we think have a lot of opportunity to grow and really stick to them. When we started off, I mean, it's like any startup. I mean, um, you don't have any credible brand, you don't have a lot of people. Essentially, your company is your brand and you are your company's brand. So anybody who trusts you will give you some work, and it could be any kind of work. And that's how we started, working with very young early stage startups, and trying to do whatever came our way, right? And I think now we have a luxury of being a little picky, and some of these areas have been very carefully strategically picked. Others have been more, we hit a customer, a big one, and we figured that, okay, this is allowing us to build some specialization that can go a long way. So it's been a combination of both.
Sure, that's fascinating. And it's definitely like one of the areas of like commerce and technology and all of the intersection of all of these is just fascinating. Um, and to me, like, that's um, one of the things that keeps my area of legal practice interesting, is that for me to have to convince the U.S. government that my clients are serious and that their employees or principals are actually engaged in something good and productive. I have to learn all of these things from people like you, so that I can then convert it to
Yeah,
the legal terminology. Um,
yeah.
so, um, okay, with that comment, let's see. Are there any? I mean, let's switch to like cross-border type of issues. Um, I understand. I mean, I guess maybe share with the audience um, like what is like your geographic footprint, and I mean, in terms of like your own um, resources, and then your customers, and any particular issues that you're facing in the cross-border area.
Mhm. Again, a very good question. I mean, if we were having this conversation in, let's say, 2018, and if you had asked me what my number one challenge in terms of the growth of the company, my answer would have been getting visas for US. And that had been our number one challenge for many years, 2016, 2017, 2018, because customers were asking for engineers to be on site and we just couldn't get visas, right? Um, so, I mean, right now our biggest presence is in Pakistan. We have a bit of presence in the US, and then we're trying to create some presence in the UK, particularly in the Cambridge area because of the startup ecosystem that exists over there. And we have a number of customers over there as well, right? Uh, so it was a big struggle because at some point when you're working with startups at an early stage, that works fine. But when you graduate to working with large companies, you need to have local presence. You need to have people who can move around freely, right? And it was becoming our biggest growth impediment that we were not able to do that at the scale that it required, right? And that is when Ali, you and I sort of connected, right? Because we started to look at other alternatives that, okay, maybe we have to look beyond the B1, B2 visas and maybe explore L1, right? And that is how we got in touch and you processed one of our applications and we actually got the visa thanks for all the good work, all the hard work that you put in, right? And there was a very interesting story because actually earlier in this February that Haris was our colleague that you processed the visa for. So we actually, myself, my partner, and Haris, we were in the US, and the whole idea was to come and sort of settle Haris over here in the Bay Area, have him meet all the customers that we had, and then we would go back and he would stay here, right? This might be a bit of a tangent here, but of course, the COVID situation was picking up at the time. Even when we left, there were indicators as things are sort of going downhill. But when we landed in the US and we had spent like a week in the UK, a couple of days on the East Coast, and then a couple of days in Dallas, and then in the Bay Area, and things were escalating every day, right? And then we realized that this was not a wise thing to stay in the US, and we had to move back because of these travel restrictions and all that. And when we decided, the very same evening, we got mugged and we lost all our passports and laptops.
Oh gosh,
Right,
no.
and there we were,
So,
no visas, no passports, and you wanting to go back to Pakistan and stuck in the US, right? Anyways, I mean, long story short, I mean, we were able to, those were very tense time. We were able to get sort of, passports and travel documents, and we actually brought Haris back because the situation over there was getting so difficult, and the guy's still stuck in Pakistan because, of course, since then there has been no travel. But interestingly, again, I'm taking a bit of a tangent. Our business development and how we've been reaching out to customer, I mean, the whole strategy has been ripped apart because it was mostly around traveling, meeting people, expanding our network, and that cannot happen anymore, right? So we had to go back to the whiteboard and redraw how we were to build, expand, and get new business, right? And in the past 4 or 5 months, I mean, that is something that we have built from scratch again. And now we have a very strong network of advisors that we've onboarded, and they are the people on the ground who are helping us sort of connect the dots, win new business, make some very strong referrals. And it's been very exciting to sort of reinvent the whole paradigm. I mean, it's been similar with HR, with our internal culture. I mean, our office has been completely shut down for the past 7 months, right? I think there are just a handful of people who choose to go work from office, like maybe 5 or 6 people. But the remaining, hundreds of people are working from home, including myself. I went to office last week after a gap of 7 months, right? So, I mean, the whole thing of how we were working as a team had to be reinvented. And the first thing was accepting that we do not know how this works because there's no literature. I mean, if you look at the literature of leadership, management, organizational development, I mean, these are some of the, most researched topics because technology is the only new thing. I mean, since day one, people have run into people issues, right? And it's the most well-researched area. But this situation has never occurred in the history of mankind, you know. And the first thing to realize is that, okay, forget about anything that you've done before. You have to relearn all the paradigm. And I think there's some things that we've done really well, and there's some things we are completely struggling with. For instance, we do not know how to onboard new people because of the lack of physical contact, human interaction. There is no human to human bonding that is happening, and it's creating a lot of challenge for us in terms of, okay, we're hiring aggressively, new people are coming in, but they're not gelling into the culture. What is culture? I mean, there are no people around you. I mean, it's just Microsoft Teams or Slack or what have you, right? So it's very, very interesting times for people who are students of leadership, management, organizational development, business development. I mean, all of these areas. I mean, it's like everything is being rewritten from scratch, right? I think I really, went on a different tangent here, but I thought I'll sort of talk about these topics a little bit.
Oh no, not a tangent at all. This is really the core of what we want to hear from you. And several things. I think the last point, at least to me, does resonate a lot because the ability to be in the office with someone else, whether it's a client or a colleague, and we work through documents together, we work through evidence. The inability to really have that in-person contact, especially with new people, like if you have experience working with someone and a good team relationship built up, that's different. You can be apart and still kind of get on the same page. But I think that in-person onboarding process that you described, I do feel that that's an area where we're going to need to think of ways to improve. Um, the other thing that you were mentioning, the case, I'll just clarify for those who are on the call but don't have familiarity with the L1A visa. So that type of visa is, it's known as a intra-company transfer, and it can be a good option for those people who work, let's say, for at least 1 year in a company in a foreign country, and then are being transferred to the U.S. To take an assignment in the U.S. with a related company. So that was the case that we did for an executive level position, and at my end, I'm basically viewing these processes as you do the groundwork, you move it through the pipeline. It first gets approved by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Um, Once that approval arrives, then my client goes to the embassy in their home country and does an interview. Sometimes it takes time there, and then they finally, get on a plane and come to the U.S. And so, my preference is to stay connected throughout because there's certainly a lot of, um, you know, um, questions and concerns that people have. And with Harris, I mean, I'm happy that at the end of the day, it things are okay. But I was just really I mean, I was sad to hear of the mugging, and that was tragic. like
Yeah.
that, you come in and when everything's ready, then that piece of paper goes. And then I guess the problem with COVID was that, the US Embassy could have simply just replaced it or renewed it. But because of COVID and they being shut down, you couldn't get a simple replacement. Um, Setting aside the fact that, okay, maybe you don't want to travel right now, but that's a problem right now for a lot of people that need services from embassies that they can't
It
get.
is. It is. There is huge amount of uncertainty on how these things are going to be handled, and we are hoping that some of these things uh, might improve once the elections are over. But I mean, it's hard to tell, right? But there's absolutely a lot of uncertainty around how the visa situation is going to play out.
Yeah. So, okay, I just want to remind our audience, and I'm pleased there's several people that are listening in, which is great. Just a reminder that we welcome questions from the audience, and the best way to do it is to go to the the questions button and enter your question in there. Okay, so that'd be great. Um, okay, so we've gone through some of, well, okay, you discussed a little bit about the L1A visa. And you did mention, okay, the problem was that historically your clients wanted people from your team to be in the US and you were not able to get visas, which I think is a big problem in our immigration system because these are folks that are clearly qualified and there's a clear need from the client side. And the inability of the system to process them, at a priority level is a problem. But just I guess I'd love to hear from you. What were things about the process, the application process that were good? What was not so good? What could be improved? What's your sense?
I think one of the key things is that the system is completely opaque, right? In our view, as you mentioned, the profile of the candidate might be extremely prolific. There's a customer ask, there is all kinds of supporting documentation that's there, and the visa would be rejected once, twice, thrice, and you wouldn't know, why is it happening, and that's not the case with, let's say, if we were to apply to, let's say, some of the European countries. If you were to apply to UK, the process is much more cumbersome because they ask for a lot more documentation. But if they reject, it comes with a very clear reasoning, right? So if you have to apply again, what to fix. In the case of US, it's completely opaque. Even if you go back to the consulate, I mean, they would. I don't think they're even allowed to give you a clear answer, right? And that becomes a little frustrating because you can't really plan anything around it. You cannot plan how to win a new customer or how to roll out your engineers to a new customer because it's just completely unpredictable.
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that we face too. Like if as attorneys, I mean, even historically, like the processes can be kind of random. Like you go in with very strong evidence, and then you get pushback on something that you thought was very strong, with conclusory kind of statements. And then recently, the problem is that the present administration, I mean, there was a what's you call that, like a process or like a where the legal community and the government community sorry, I was trying to say custom. There's a custom between the immigration bar and the US immigration agencies to stay in touch. Like, so every month, some high level government person would come and discuss, okay, here's like the kinds of problems we are seeing in Pakistan or in Brazil. And, okay, the attorneys can present their issues and have a conversation. But in this administration, they have basically canceled all such engagements. So it's become very difficult, like, to have a flow of information. But you're right. I mean, and I think that's one of the areas for reform. And it's interesting because I think we are a huge, like, kind of the consumers of the immigration services are a lot because of the way the US is. It's very unique. You have 50 states and airports and land borders and all kinds of crossings. So so yes, but that's definitely, and I think for business customers to be facing such problems, it a good lawyer definitely helps. But
Yeah.
It's still frustrating.
It is,
So
and actually, this was one of the key reasons for us sort of trying to diversify into the European market, particularly UK, because we figured that, okay, there's geographic proximity, and most importantly, the immigration processes were at least much more predictable and transparent, right? Obviously, I mean, in comparison, I mean, US is by orders of magnitude much more lucrative in terms of the quality of business and the amount of business that exists over there, and ideally we wouldn't want to diversify. But this is one reason that has been pushing us, and it still continues to. I mean, let's see how things unfold after COVID, because COVID has been a great disruptor. But this has been sort of a consistent pain point, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Okay, good. Okay, so good. We have the audience is getting energized and has sending questions. So we have a question from Islamabad, from Pakistan. It's from Shahzad from Islamabad. Um, and it says, Owais, where do you see Emumba in the next year, in the next 2 years, in terms of growth, team members, etc.?
Yeah, so obviously, I think COVID has been an avenue where our regular projections and strategy have been put to question. I think things are a lot less uncertain. Let me just put it that way now. It's not that situation is still extremely clear, but at least I think we have a better sense of where we stand as to what kind of risk we anticipate. I think if I were to look, for the next maybe 3 years, I think I'd like to see 100% growth, both in terms of the number of people, as well as in terms of revenue. So if we are a 150 people company, in 3 years time, I'd like to be a 300 people company. And in terms of revenue, at least 2x of where we currently are. So that's at least the starting baseline.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another question. It says, during COVID-19, a lot of companies are offering remote jobs to engineers. Do you think it will replace offices to move to virtual offices?
I think that has already happened. For us, we know for a fact that we will perhaps settle on a hybrid model, which means that we always had the culture of work from home, or at least allowing people to work remotely. It wasn't as pervasive, so to speak. This term of digital transformation, I think this has been powered by COVID. The thing that were taking years and years, those transformations have happened in a matter of months. What was considered infeasible has already been deemed feasible. Things do work remotely. So absolutely, yes. I think we will work extremely differently compared to how we used to work. Remote work is going to be perhaps a norm, and that includes myself. I don't see myself going to work even if things were back to normal as frequently. We also think that remote work, of course, some companies have announced already that they will allow people to work remotely indefinitely. I think we have a much more sort of considered take on that. We think that people who can work responsibly, who demonstrate that they can work responsibly while remote, should get to do that. And people who do not exercise that freedom responsibly should not be offered that freedom at all, right? So whenever we settle on a hybrid model, I think ideally we'd like everybody to be able to work remotely, but it comes with very clear expectations of how people are supposed to behave, act, respond as a team player when remote. And again, these are the best practices that we have to define, evolve, learn, because this has not been done before, not at the scale that we have to face now.
Sure, sure. No, thank you. Good question. Thanks for asking. So I have one more question from a very brilliant lawyer who happens to be the head of our business group, Glenn Solomon. And the question is, aside from the immigration challenge of bringing employees to the US, are there any compensation considerations that apply to these employees that are different from US employees? So let me read it again. Aside from the immigration challenge of bringing employees to the US, are there any compensation considerations that apply to these employees that are different from US employees? So one way to I mean, yeah, sure, you can answer this just, I guess, for a foreign national coming to the US to work in your organization in the US? Is there any different compensation issue? I think maybe there is also, like, for example, um, anyway, what do you think?
Um, I'll try to address it based on how I understood the question, and I'm not sure what I understood it correctly. But when we bring people to the U.S., their compensation in terms of the number and how they can be compensated in terms of the modalities is very much driven by the kind of visa they obtain, right? So for N1 workers, they have to be employed by the U.S. entity, and obviously, their compensation, where they're living, everything has to be done by the U.S. entity. If somebody is just traveling, I mean, they can't be compensated in the U.S. I mean, they're just travelers, business travelers. They just go there. They might be getting per diem or whatever it is, right? Daily allowance or whatever. But it's a short visit. But they are essentially employed by the foreign entity. I think those are sort of the legalities or the modalities, and I'm not sure whether that was entirely the essence or intent of the question. Um, but yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to it. I mean, I am thinking that um, perhaps, maybe the salary levels in the US tend to be higher than the salary levels in other countries in terms of, it might be, um, or
Oh,
the
absolutely. I mean,
structure.
from that point of view, yes. I mean, there's a day and night difference. Not even in between, different countries, even inside of US, right? I mean, you compare Bay Area with Dallas, with North Carolina, with Nashville. I mean, there is 2x, 3x difference within that, right? I mean, if you go to Santa Clara County, I mean, in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and if you are making $110,000 a year, you qualify for low income housing.
Mm.
$110,000 a year, and you qualify for low income housing, right? So
Wow.
the average starting salary right now in the Bay Area has exceeded 120K, the starting salary, fresh out of school, right?
Wow.
You compare that with the salary numbers in the UK, which obviously is more of a welfare kind of a state, right?
Yeah.
And the starting salary over there is around $40,000, right?
Right. Right.
You go to Eastern Europe, I mean, it's much lower. And
Right.
then, of course, even within US, I mean, it's a continent, right? Yeah,
Right.
of course, it's a country, but it's also a continent. I mean, by its size and magnitude, and there's a huge variation between one state to the other, right? Of course, Bay Area is on the one extreme in terms of the insane amount of, you know, the cost of living expenses, as well as the amount of money that people make over there. So it's a huge consideration in terms of the geographies that we pick. For instance, when we decided that our key person who's getting L1 is going to be settled in the Bay Area, it wasn't an easy decision because the
Right.
cost of that person living over there is going to be extremely high. But then it
Right.
has to be matched by the opportunity, right?
Right.
If we can really win that opportunity and can monetize it, then it's worth it. And if you cannot, then it just becomes unaffordable. We just do not want to pick a geography with low sort of cost of living expense just because it's cheaper to live over there. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business development expense.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, and really, I mean, appreciate your insights there. Um, so again, same topic, just to clarify. So how about, like, so in these international transfers, are there other issues other than salary, like such as benefits, like, so say moving expenses, signing bonus expenses, anything like this, like, um, what have you seen?
Um, when you're moving people from one geography to another, I think generally moving expense and perhaps I think these things do apply. Let's say when somebody's living in the US and you're asking that person to move from one state to another or from one city to another, right? But when people are changing countries, typically these kind of benefits or perks don't come into consideration, right? Because people, it's very rare that people would move their houses and everything, right? I mean, they travel lean, they go to a new location and just set up over there. Yes, I think in terms of the sign up bonus, that okay, joining going to a new geography, and you get a bit of a bonus so that you can, whatever capex you have in terms of setting up your apartment or house, what have you, you have a bit of a financial leverage to cover that up. I think that is more natural, and that is done more frequently and more commonly as well.
Got it. Sure. No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Um, So, all right, well, good. One other question from the audience. Let's see. This is from Hassan from Islamabad. He says, have there been any challenges that you've been facing in terms of talent acquisition and training in Pakistan?
Talent acquisition is a challenge anywhere in the world, particularly if you're trying to build an A-class team. There's always competition, there's always scarcity, right? And you need to have a very well-oiled machine to bring in the right amount of talent, the right kind of talent. You need to have very well-oiled machinery to groom them to become a fit for your culture, and you need to have very strong mechanisms to retain that talent, right? So it's an ongoing effort. I think there's enough talent in Pakistan. I mean, we are primarily based out of Islamabad, which is not a large city, but the numbers are, in terms of the talent that's being produced over here, are pretty compelling, right? Islamabad itself is not a very large city, around 2 million population, but there are 45 universities in Islamabad and suburbs. That's a pretty high number, the per capita density of universities, right? So there's a lot of talent being produced. Now, granted that all of this talent is not Stanford and Harvard material, but our advantage of being here is that we can attract the top 1% of this talent, right? And if we can do that, if we can have them, if we can retain them, if we can train them, I think we have a winning combination. But as I said, I mean, these things never come easy in any geography. You need to work hard at it, and it's a constant, ongoing effort.
Sure, sure. It is true. I mean, there's a lot of good human capital, but I'm sure that, like, finding the best and brightest is it takes some deliberate effort.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, okay, tell me, let's go outside of immigration a little bit. Like, how about other legal areas? Like, do you have, for example, any intellectual property related issues that come up, or commercial disputes? Um, just any experience that comes to mind that you would like to share with us, I would be interested to know.
Yeah, good question. So yes, I think we have needs all across, right? I mean, all the way from setting up a legal entity, making sure that it's in good health in terms of the SEC filing and what have you. Then putting together contracts, and that's becoming an increasing challenge because different customers have different kind of needs, and we're running into different nature of contracts as well. In some cases there's IP sharing, in some cases it's pure services work. So there's all kind of variation. There's no one template that applies to everybody. So there are all kind of variations that are coming into play. There are sort of aspects related to hiring and offer letters and contracts, right? I mean, for instance, I had to let go of somebody about a year ago in the US, right? And you have to make sure that you're well protected, right? That you're doing it correctly, right? So there's a procedure around that as well. Um, I think we've been bitten in the past by the lack of due diligence in these areas, and I think we've learned our lesson the hard way. Without taking names, I think we had a customer in the UK who ran away with a lot of money. They didn't pay us. We were just trying to be nice, and a lot of payments got accrued, and I don't think we had enough proper paperwork done to have the right amount of deterrence or even pursue it legally. Yeah, lesson learned that, okay, you need to be nice with customers and everything, absolutely, but you need to cover your bases. So the answer is yes. I think we have needs all across in all of those areas, and perhaps even more. We're looking at even intellectual property around patents, right? I think there are a couple of things that we want to find patents for, right? So I think the kind of needs that you would expect for any tech company in the US to have, I think we are at a point where we have all of those needs. Even though we may not have a lot of people in the US right now, but I think all of these needs in terms of HR, in terms of SEC filing, intellectual property, contracts, we need all of that.
Sure. And one of the things that I've seen is that I mean, I originally belong to Pakistan, and I have many friends and family, and I see a lot of very successful businessmen, and not so much like, okay, I mean, I think in the tech sector, you guys are very much plugged into communities of clients that are like, you're interacting with them on a more regular basis. But I've very commonly like goods manufacturers, textile producers, exporters of like surgical equipment. These are very massive commercial enterprises back in Pakistan. I've had 2 or 3 clients come to me and say that they've sold like, almost like millions of dollars worth of like goods and haven't been paid. And a lot of times their documentation is weak. They just didn't do the kind of agreements that they should have done. And I wonder, some of it's like a cultural thing where there's this idea that, oh well, there's trust, and like if you put something on paper, then that means that you don't trust me. But I wonder what your thoughts are about just the overall business culture in Pakistan. Like, I mean, do you see some norms evolving, or is there some spread of business being done in the old way um, versus like more modern type of mechanisms?
Yeah, a very interesting question. A disclaimer that I don't think I'm really qualified to comment on sort of the non-tech areas because I don't have direct experience. But in terms of the culture context, particularly looking at Pakistan, I think the quality of laws and the availability of laws, I think that's not a big question. I think there are plenty of good laws over here. But with the legal matters, it's just not the laws. It is also the enforceability of the law. How easily can it be enforced, right? So the general sentiment or the general perception in Pakistan is that the legal system works extremely slow, painfully slow, to the extent that people would rather not pursue that route. That if something is stuck, they would try to look for an out-of-court settlement. If that doesn't happen, they perhaps move on, right? And I think that mindset perhaps continues with their international relations as well. That I don't think their natural reaction is to really make sure that they do a lot of good legal work, paperwork done, because they perhaps do not realize that it can be really valuable for such situations. Because with maybe international trade, the enforceability is perhaps much more easily doable, so to speak.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. So, okay, we have like about just under 10 minutes left. How is the long term looking um, in terms of Emumba? Like, what do you think the next 15 years hold?
So I think that's a question that perhaps delves into some philosophical domains as well.
Yeah,
But for me, I think one of the key sort of focus areas is to do succession planning. I mean, ideally, I would want to make myself irrelevant in the company in the next 5 years, which means that I want to have really high quality leadership, right? That doesn't mean I leave the company or I move on. It's just an ambition. It's just an approach towards how I want to invest in the leadership of the company, right? Number one. Number two, we want to become a company that becomes a dot on the map. And what I mean by that is that we have this huge appetite of attracting top talent from around the world. We're working in really cutting edge technologies. We want to be recognized as a company that's doing some really amazing work, and people are surprised. Okay, this is this kind of work being done in Pakistan, really? And we're already doing that. I mean, we've done. I wouldn't go into details, but we've done some amazing work in the past couple of years, which is unprecedented for this geography, right? So I mean, it's essentially you set a new bar in terms of what can be done, in different geographies, because there's tremendous amount of talent. All you have to do is to enable them and give them, big vision and ambitions to pursue, and they'll make great things happen. The third area where we want to really put focus on is, um, uh, you know, finding ways to bring efficiencies into revenue generation, right? And what I mean by that is that in the services work, like, I mean, your industry is also services work, right? You have to draft a contract, get paid for it. If you have to do another contract, you have to perhaps, do a lot of work again, in terms of the specifics, right? That's true for software services as well, that, with one customer, you do a lot of work, you get paid. With another customer, you have to do maybe similar work, but you have to do it again because, it's new IP, it's their IP. How do you get to a point where you have much more reuse so that if you have to do similar work again, you can do it faster, you can do it better, you can do it without having to rely on star performers, and still generate a lot of revenue, right? So that journey from pure services to recurring revenues or monetization through efficient mechanisms is a constant journey, or a focus that we have. And again, I don't have yet time to go into a lot of details, but fundamentally, as I said previously, that we want to have in the next 3 years 2x the people and 2x the revenues. Ideally, it should be 2x the people and 3x the revenues. We don't want it to be a linear equation, right? So that multiplicity of how much revenue can you generate by incremental addition of your talent needs to be a non-linear equation, right? And that's, I mean, that's one of the key challenges that we want to be able to solve in coming years.
Got it. So alrighty, we have like 4 minutes, and probably can take one or two more questions from the audience. So please feel free to type your questions on the questions box. Owais, is there anything you want to ask me, or anything that we didn't cover that you want to touch on?
I think if I were to ask you, I, I think the key thing is, what is your take? I know you cannot have an exact answer to this, but in terms of immigration, of course, there are things related to COVID because, a lot of movement has been, you know, compromised because of that. But there is perhaps some policy and there's a general sense of direction as well as to where the country is headed. But what is your sort of personal take as to where things will be 3, 6, 9 months from now in terms of the openness of the visas, whether they're business visas or L1s or H1s and what have you?
Yeah, that's a magic question. You know, so I mean, we have some track record because there were some trends in place right at the time that COVID happened, and then we had you know primarily logistics and healthcare related closures. So the embassies started shutting down. The air travel was extremely limited. Um, and then slowly I mean, even though like, so you have the travel ban between like most of Europe, um, and let's say India and China, a couple other handful of countries that are, if you've been in those countries for within the last 14 days, you can't come into the US. Um, and there's a whole series of waivers that you need to apply for. Um, the waivers are not really being administered very uniformly, and they're time consuming. Um, Although I had some spots here and there of good news for certain. We actually had an H-1B visa issued in Pakistan like 2 weeks ago, which is
Wow.
despite the ban on H, and but we argued a waiver and extreme sort of um, like it's a national interest waiver where you can show that the U.S. employer has a dramatic need. Um, but where is it going? I think the things that will definitely play a positive role are, better adapting better to workplaces to be, healthy and safe and reduce transmission risk. So I think that's going to vary from country to country, and how the COVID rates are in those countries. So some embassies have, on a limited basis, started opening up as the COVID rates have gone down. I think it is also political. I do think that the current regime has been, rather not very enthusiastic about really, opening things up. But I feel that, I mean, it's hard to say, but I do feel that with a change in administration, we will see some easing up of travel. So, I mean, 9 months, I would be optimistic. I would say either way. Like, I hope that within 9 months, I think the shock that the system has experienced will kind of settle down, and um, normal operations may start resuming. Um, because the need is here, right? Like, so I mean, we saw that just within weeks of COVID, there were executive orders passed which said that it was basically under the guise of the high unemployment rate and reducing foreign workers coming in because there's a high unemployment rate. But very quickly, it turns out that among those, professional workers, the unemployment rate is not that high. We're not really bringing in people. I mean, you have people with degrees and advanced skills. So that argument went away. Right now, it's kind of back to normal. We don't really have that shortage. So, the arguments against H-1Bs or Ls um, from a economic point of view has been proven to be wrong. So I think now it's really just about healthcare and COVID related. But 9 months, I'm thinking I have a positive outlook because the demand is strong. Like, I mean, even just I'm really very impressed with my own law firm. Like, we've been doing really well. It's been busy, and I mean, I guess.
Good to know.
Yeah. So that's it. Okay, so I think Owais, we are good. We've gone a little past the hour. It was a pleasure, a delightful opportunity to speak with you. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to other opportunities. If there was anything that we didn't cover today to the audience, like, please email me, and we'll try to get you answers. Owais and I stay in touch regularly, and like I said, we will have the recording sent around to those who signed up, and it's going to be on our website as well. So please share with others. So Owais, thanks
thank
so
you.
much.
So the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for creating the opportunity and for allowing me to speak. And particularly, I want to thank the audience who've been very patient and have been with us through the hour. Thank you very much, all of you.
Okay, great. Well, everybody, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, bye, everybody.